I think lyrically this works for me because this is about as happy as this album gets lyrically.
Which is frankly not all that happy, by the way.
Yeah. Hello, and welcome to 1001 Album Complaints, the show where award-winning shit talkers discuss the backstory of classic albums featured on the list of Robert Dimery's 1001 albums to listen to before you die. For those listeners who are returning, and especially those that support us on Patreon, we love you. Thank you. And for anyone else who is tuning in for the first time, here's a quick breakdown of what we do on the show. We pick an album from Dimery's list, randomly selected for us by the grooviest of groovy Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. Sorry guys to blow the cover. Lovingly referred to as the Albinator. We go through a brief history of the band, and then making of our featured album, we'll discuss a selection of the songs and finally vote on whether this album is truly one that you need to hear before you die. Now, as you might be able to tell by the title of this podcast, we are complainers. You can expect us to come armed to the teeth with quibbles, nitpicks, and hair splits. While our opinions are almost always correct all the time,
yes.
We are not infallible, which is why we encourage our listeners to let us have it on our 1001 Album Complaints Patreon page or by writing us an email at 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, why am I not hearing the sultry tones of Rob's velvety voice? The military precision with which Tom delivers? Or perhaps the cowabunga dude whimsy of complainer Phil? That is because this week you are stuck with me. My name is Marty, and I like to party. Ask anyone that knows me. I've been a drummer for over 20 years, but more importantly, I've been singing the blues my entire life. Let us begin our journey. Today's album was described by the BBC as having a terrific throaty chug, garrulous vocals that are treacly yet romantic, evoking a strange crooning lineage that can be traced back to Roy Orbison. I don't know what the hell that guy was listening to. The album being referred to here is 1987's Darklands by the Jesus and Mary Chain. And let me say, Tom, I've always thought that you had a terrific throaty chug.
Oh, thanks, Marty. Don't let our wives know that.
So before I get to introducing the other members of tonight's discussion, here is a sample from the title track of the album. We've got that little teaser out of the way. Let's go ahead and introduce tonight's panel by the way of a mean tweet. And so tonight we have a special guest. We have Brian, who's a longtime listener to the podcast, and an American Gen Xer who grew up listening to the UK bands of the 80s. He's joining us from my sister city, or I should say brother city, or is supposed to be Seattle, but actually he's in Europe, right? You're in Ireland for this taping, so forget what I had written down. I will say I imagine it's also rainy and dark there and miserable.
Just perfect for this album.
Which should make us both ready for this album. So all right, Brian, I'll let you start. Why don't you go ahead and give us your mean tweet?
Thanks, Marty. Good to be here. My tweet is, I listened to Darklands, and now I find the joy has left my soul. 3 chords and a drum machine, their lyrics make me weep. Can we review Psycho Candy instead?
Wow, that's a first singing tweet.
Yeah, there we go. I love it.
I'm impressed. You're going to do great here, Brian.
Now, was it Roy Orbison singing? Because the bar has been set high.
Almost. Yeah. Might need a little auto-tune, but we'll make that happen in post. All right, next we'll go ahead and toss it to Rob. Go ahead, Rob.
Thanks so much, Marty. And Brian, let me just say welcome. And that was very appropriate for the country you're currently sitting in. That was one of those a cappella bar songs like I'm expecting when I walk into any pub in Ireland. But here is my tweet. There will never be another band quite like the Jesus and Mary Chain. But that's mostly because Quaaludes went off the market in 1985.
That's good. Excellent. How about you, Tom?
All right. Thank you, Marty. My tweet is, I would rather listen to Jesus Jones and Mary Chapin Carpenter cover Alice in Chains songs than listen to Darklands by the Jesus and Mary Chain. And you know what? As I say that, I'm not even sure that's a diss on the Jesus and Mary Chain or just a really good idea.
Wow. A wordsmith as usual. Great job, Tom. All right, here's mine. If you are coming to Jesus and Mary Chain hoping to have a religious experience, expect the kind that you would get in a little dark room in the back of Holy Savior Church from Father Peter in the winter of 1993.
Wow.
That's not true.
Sure it isn't, Marty.
The names were changed. All right, so now that we got those excellent round of tweets, guys. That's really impressive. Let's go ahead and talk about kind of the general impressions of this album.
Everything's set at middle school dance tempo. That's what I kept thinking of.
I think it might have just been a confusion in my brain. I was expecting to hear like the Jesus Lizard, like that style of music when I turned this on. And then I kept reading about how these guys were blurring the lines between pop music and feedback. And I was like, I didn't get either of those things on this album. Like, there's not a lot of feedback. There's not a lot of pop going on here either.
Also, there's a lot of history about, like, adversarial shows where there'd be fights and, like...
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, where I listen to this, and I'm just like, oh, it sounds like you're too cool to cry music or something. Like, you want to cry, but you're just too...
This was interesting because this was arguably a transitional album for them. This was their maturing and growing up album after their debut, which was confrontational and distortion-filled. This was them realizing that they couldn't be a one-trick pony their whole career, and they had to come up with something to create.
Yeah.
Now, what they created was maybe a little sad.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm coming in reasonably positive on this one. I do see why people like this. This was my first time hearing the record, although I had listened to Psycho Candy a handful of times, the debut record that I think you were just referring to, Brian, which is also on the list and is way more, or seems way more experimental to me. Noisier, weirder. This is pretty melodic, has some cool texture, seems to have a point of view in the lyrics. Like, I'll definitely listen to it again. I'm certainly not an essential, and I'm hoping that the backstory provides some of that context, but it's definitely a mood, and yeah, I could see myself listening to this.
Yeah, anytime I listen to an album and the first listen, which my first listen of this album was a month ago or so, anytime I listen to an album for the first time that I know is popular and nothing stands out to me, usually that's a good sign. Usually if I listen 5 or 6, it starts to pop, and that's kind of what happened with this album for me. I kind of started to understand it. It helped that I read/listened to the brothers, biography, helped me understand the album and put a little bit of context to it, which I will explain to you guys in a little bit. But yeah, I think this album definitely grew on me.
It's got a forward-looking element to it, I thought. I was hearing Pavement, I was hearing even Nirvana, and then even more modern bands like The National or Jeff the Brotherhood, if you guys ever listen to that band. So I was hearing all these touchstones that came after them that it sounded to me like had listened to them. And that is usually a good sign for me.
Right. If you put yourself in 1987 and this comes on, you're like, these guys are cool. There's a coolness to it that I think is present in how it's presented.
You know how else I knew that, Marty? Is because they're wearing sunglasses in their press photo.
Right. That's
Yeah.
They took that from Roy Orbison, too.
I am less high on this album than I think that the rest of y'all are. There were some songs that very clearly showed that they were transitioning and they didn't quite know how to work the new sound into it. Like some of the songs that were like just very clearly punk influenced, that they were kind of playing with this all the jagged edges buffed out style, didn't necessarily work to me. What really did work was when they got hypnotic and they sort of leaned into, they have a very like all downstrokes on the bass style and kind of hit one chord, and then the lead guitar is sort of just doing like a 2-note kind of do thing. Like when they really leaned into that and got hypnotic, I thought it worked really well. Some of the songs, oddly enough, as a comment for me. Some of the songs just didn't seem like they were long enough to sort of get me to that hypnosis point, and I kind of almost wanted them to be a little bit longer.
Wow, I've never heard anyone say that on this podcast.
I know.
That's amazing.
Maybe I gave the wrong impression. I enjoyed it. I would listen to it again. But it's one of those weeks where I think I'm actually going to pick it apart a little more when we get into the details, because it is pretty samey. Like I said, you have to really be in a certain depressed kind of mood to want to listen to it. It's not popping off the page to me. I'm trying to say that I'm sort of somewhere in the middle. It was pleasant enough, but it didn't smack me in the face.
Yeah, no, I get that.
I got into this one a couple of years after it came out, so this would have been very early 90s when I was in my early 20s. And so I think it's got a special place in my own musical evolution because of the age I was when I heard it, and because it was a gateway for me. As you guys have noted, it influenced so many other bands. Britpop and shoegaze probably wouldn't have happened in the way they did were it not for this band and to some extent this album. And so I think being there at the time, it felt special because it was a bridge to something new.
And that's a great perspective. I mean, I think with any album that I hold on to and in a kind of nostalgic sense, it can never be detached from that for me. And so there are certain albums that even a million people might hate them, but I like them because they're attached to some part of my life. And I think that's really important context.
Yeah, of course. And I think this is a great thing that you can add, Brian, for sure. Not just coming from the perspective of a fan, but from someone who lived through this movement a little bit more directly than at least I did, or I think we did. Because I am curious, like, for instance, you mentioned shoegaze, not a area I'm super well versed in, but stuff like My Bloody Valentine would have been definitely downstream of this. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, there's a documentary featuring that follows both this band and My Bloody Valentine and Cocteau Twins around. And so they were all at some point running in the same circle.
Okay.
Yeah, and My Bloody Valentine's very earliest work sounded a lot like the Jesus and Mary chain until they evolved their sound into what became their own signature direction.
I am definitely curious, and I want to hear from the story, Marty. Was this much more of a British UK phenomenon, or were they like reasonably popular in the US? It seemed like they might have been something that like the cool kids in the US were listening to, but they weren't getting a whole lot of other play outside of that.
Yeah, this was college radio music in the US, and this was top 40. Some of these songs were top 10 pop hits in the UK, whereas it was strictly left of the dial in the US.
That's a good point. And Tom, I don't think we'll spend a lot of time covering that. So Brian's comment there probably is the most helpful you'll get out of that. But I'm curious, Brian, what were you doing when you found this album?
In college, got really into the band Cocteau Twins because I happened to see them on MTV when they had their mild commercial break in the US. And in those early pre-interweb days, through word of mouth, I heard, if you like Cocteau Twins, check out this other band from Scotland that sounds a little different, like something you won't hear on the radio. And got into the Mary chain, which led me on to a lot of other bands. And I think that's the way a lot of people in the States found them back then.
And this, I do feel like I'm almost surprised that I knew about this band. I'm trying to think of exactly where they would have come from. Maybe they had a mid-90s, a little bit more of a breakthrough in the US with Stoned and Dethroned. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, they had a minor pop top 40 hit with one of the Stoned and Dethroned singles in the US.
Yeah, I agree. But my memory of them was somehow being adjacent to the early grunge bands in some vague sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, Stoned and Dethroned, honestly, like, you talk about them being Pavement fans. You got Slanted and Enchanted, Stoned and Dethroned coming through, you know, like, I can see the through line there. I also kind of saw a little bit of a through line to bands like Yo La Tengo.
Sure.
Maybe, yeah, they might be a little bit more, I'll say, evolved in their sound, maybe a little cleaner in their sound, but I like Yo La Tengo a lot, and I feel like, again, Yo La Tengo took that sort of like lean into the hypnosis thing that Jesus and Mary Chain does well sometimes, and they just kind of made a much more broad sound out of that.
Yeah, I agree, but Yo La Tengo also went through a fairly long evolution and several albums. Those early albums are pretty noisy, and they're, at least when I saw them live, they were extremely noisy and experimental seeming, above and beyond what I thought I heard on the record. I'll just throw one more band in, and I usually think it bodes well for the band we're covering when we have lots of bands to mention. But the American version, if you will, that I thought of was The Replacements. He reminded me a little bit, the songwriting reminded me a little bit of Paul Westerberg.
Yeah, in terms of the songwriting, there were a lot of times where you can tell sometimes when like the lyrics were written first and then they kind of like were not written with a melody in mind. They weren't written with a particular cadence in mind. They sort of like wrote a poem and they're like, I'm going to put this to music now. And I thought that there was sometimes that worked well because there was something that they had something to say in the lyrics, but sometimes it just came off as a little like clunky and a little forced.
But they do have a good sense of melody, and that's kind of one thing that got brought out the more I listened to, that maybe was a little more subtle when I first heard it. But they do have a control, or at least a good idea of what a good melody is. And the album also has a consistency to it from track one to the end, mood wise, which I always appreciate. When I love when an album is like a concept that kind of, when there's a concept that kind of flows through from beginning to end, which I find happens in this album.
Was that concept terrible drum sound? Was that the concept they were going for?
Well, it was a drum machine. Well, they purposely decided to not have a drummer.
Yeah.
And I think it probably in the end helped them, because it takes that element out. And this album, as you'll learn, is more of just a direct collaboration between the two brothers. Without a lot of noise.
I don't dislike the actual drums. I just feel like there's a lack of presence in the way that the drums come through, and they feel so far back compared to everything else. And clearly they were trying to do that because every track's not going to sound like that if it wasn't on purpose.
I think it's kind of cool, if you think about it, 1987, I just think it's kind of to have like a rock band, a distortion rock band, not have a drummer. It's kind of wild for that year.
It's bold.
Bold. All right, we've gabbed enough about our impressions, which we can also add to later, but let's go ahead and talk about the backstory of the band. But first, we're going to take a quick break. And we're back. So the Jesus and Mary Chain origin story begins with two brothers, Jim and William Reed, and they were born in Glasgow, Scotland. William is the older brother and Jim is the younger. There wasn't a whole lot of info about their childhood, but I was able to get a lot of information from their book, which is called Never Understood. And that's kind of how I felt about their accents, listening to them read their book. I walked away feeling like, huh?
Tom and I once visited a bar in Glasgow, and we were shocked by how little we could understand of the patrons there.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, it was like closing time and everybody was shit-faced, inclling us. That might have something to do with it.
Right. I could imagine just slowly understanding less and less as you get drunker and drunker.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
The brothers grew up in tenements in Glasgow, and William, being the older one, he spent a lot more time there before they moved out than the younger one. And he speaks in this book as having this like fondness for it. They talk about how on the one hand they would share a bathroom with 10 other families, but also how everyone in the community kind of looked out for each other and had each other's back. And they also had a kind of a common thread, which was hatred for their rival soccer team, the Celts, the Irish Celts.
Of course. And
so kind of everyone bonded over that. Eventually, the family moved out of the tenements into a town called East Kilbride. And they talk about in this book how as they were moving out, all of their people that lived in their tenement called them snobs.
It's like we had this great community. We all looked out for each other. And the second we left, like, fucking punk ass.
Yeah, they're like, fuck you. So yeah, the brothers there's a 4-year gap between them, and you can just hear it in the way that they talk, because the way this audiobook works is that they take turns talking about their perspectives in each time of their lives. And so William has this real like Cockney, rough, like slurring accent, Scottish accent, and Jim has this kind of refined, posh, gentle accent, and I think it's just due to the older brother having spent more time in those tenements. And so, as I alluded to, the family are huge soccer fans. William talked about how everyone would decorate their houses in blue, which is the Scottish team color, and how their dad, who was colorblind, once bought a green telephone, which is the Celtic color. And that kind of made them kind of a laughing stock.
Yeah, the neighbors immediately beat the shit out of him.
Right, exactly. So William ended up joining a traveling soccer fan club, which I guess exists.
That's just roving hooligans, essentially what you're talking about.
I guess. But he said he was real surprised because his parents would just let him like take off for days to follow this club around, and were totally cool with it. He said the older guys in the club would look after him. They would stick up for him. They would buy him food, give him money. And so the kind of story with William is that he has this kind of places a lot of value in community throughout his early formative years. And he's also filled with nostalgia. He's always referring back to kind of how things were and how simple things were. Where Jim, on the other hand, he's more quiet and reserved. He hated soccer. You could tell that he was like bullied hard by William. You can just tell, but it's not unlike a lot of younger, older brother relationships. So at this point in their young life, they're almost like polar opposites. And so you ask yourself, how do these guys end up forming a band? So one thing that brought them together is just the circumstance. They moved to East Kilbride and didn't have friends. And the friends they made there's a kind of sectarian thing going on in Kilbride because there's a Protestant group and a Catholic group. And so they would make friends in the neighborhood, and then when it was time to go to school, they would just get dragged away, and they weren't allowed to be friends anymore. And so they would see their friends disappear, and so they had no one really but themselves to hang out with. And so the next thing that kind of brought them together was their love for music. And so William talks about laying in bed. They shared a room, and they would put the radio on at night when they were going to sleep, and that the kind of signal would kind of go in and out and start picking up other stations. And that was kind of an impressionable thing in kind of how they thought about music. And you can probably hear it on the album that came out before this, which was called
Psycho Candy.
Psycho Candy as a test. William talked about when he was 12, he got the greatest gift for his birthday, which was a record player. And he was blown away and he was so pumped. But what ended up happening is he would go to play a record and it wouldn't be there. His parents would have taken it up to their room. His brother would have taken it up to their room. And so it was a gift from his parents to him, but it ended up just being a family gift that everyone shared. And he seemed to be pretty resentful of that.
This is the younger brother, right? Yeah,
This is the older brother. Oh,
the older brother. Oh, wow. Okay. So he didn't just go and immediately just whoop the shit out of his brother, take it back?
Nope. He's like, you give me a gift, and then it's not really my gift.
Yeah,
like, I didn't know.
And it seems like music was one of the things that brought the quarreling brothers together. It was like the one thing they found they could agree on was they both loved the same records.
Absolutely. So yeah, they had a jointly owned record collection. And so they got real obsessed with Top of the Pops, and that kind of got them into music. And so, yeah, they had shared a record collection, and that's really how they got into music. And so now we move into the early 80s, and William and Jim start to work on songwriting without really knowing how to play any instruments. And so William said that he just started writing songs that sounded exactly like other songs that he liked, and would just try to play guitar like other songs he liked.
That's the way to do it, man. It's the way to get started, definitely.
Yeah, it's a good call.
Sure, without having sort of formal training. So in 1983, the Reed brothers was laid off from his job at Caterpillar, as they say, went on the dole.
He worked for Caterpillar, like the earth-moving equipment company?
Yeah, like the earth-moving equipment company, exactly.
Wow. Back when they still made that kind of shit in England, I'm sure they don't make that anywhere near there now.
Yeah, and so like I feel like when they kind of portray this as when he got laid off, he kind of had like a mental breakdown where he was always a pretty good father, but he ended up focusing more on them when he was laid off. And what he did in what they call an unspeakable act of kindness is that he used part of his dole money to buy them a Tascam Portastudio 4-track.
It's got scam right in the title.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's right, exactly. Oh, yeah. And they talk about how it would always break down, but yeah.
Yeah. But again, honestly, we talked about this on previous episodes. My parents, they weren't rich, but they weren't poor. They certainly weren't on welfare, and they weren't buying me musical equipment. Like, here you go, help fulfill your dreams. So that's some good supportive parenting. Good for them.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't imagine like, hey, I'm unemployed, but here's $500 on a recorder just because you're mildly interested.
Yeah.
So they were living at with their folks at the time, and talk about just like staying up all night long and just messing with this 4-track. And this is the beginning of the Jesus and Mary chain.
So this is like early 1980s?
Early 1980s, 1982, 1983.
Okay. So just so that we're clear here, though, like this is 1982. And I mean, they were all well into working age at this point, and they still have their unemployed dad buying them.
They were still living with their parents.
Yeah, still living with their parents, unemployed.
I think William had tried to move out, and he went to England and just couldn't get a job and ended up moving back.
Yeah, they're like 22 and 26 years old, and their unemployed dad is still buying them musical gear. That's
right.
Maybe more loving than a parent than I would have even liked. I would have liked I remember 15 years old telling my parents I wanted a guitar. They were like, get a fucking job, buddy. Good luck.
Yeah, at some point you've crossed a line from loving parent to enabler.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think it probably goes back to kind of this tightness that they had from when they lived in the tenements, and it seemed like they had a real kind of tight family circle. They talk about how in Scottish families, at least in the tenements, the women held the kind of matriarchal status in society, and they would be the ones that would be smoking, drinking, and cursing, and the dads would be kind of quiet and working,
Doesn't sound bad.
No, not at all. So they have this 4-track recorder, and they talk about getting into recording demo tapes, and they were kind of fighting over the 4-track. And so they would have a timeshare where William would be allowed to use it after their parents went to bed from 10 to 12, and then he'd have to give it to Jim, and Jim could use it from 12 to 2. And so they started off not working collaboratively on music. They said they always would just talk about the bands they would start. Like, I would start this band, my band would be like this, and then William would say that, and then Jim would be like, well, my band's going to be like this. And so they'd have these conversations about their different bands that they were going to start. Then eventually they realized, like, hey, we're talking about the same stuff.
Do you have any intel on what they were listening to? I mean, this would be like late 70s.
They were listening to Thin Lizzy. They were listening to Mark Bolan and T-Rex. Those were the big ones.
Of course.
They liked the Sex Pistols, all of the UK big bands that were on top of the pops at the time.
And there was also some Velvet Underground in there.
Oh, totally.
And weirdly, it seemed like they were torn between the two poles of the Velvet Underground on one side and like 60s and 50s and 60s girl groups on the other side, which explains some of their later sound.
I'm totally glad you brought that up, because I meant to mention that in my general impressions. There's definitely a connection to 50s girl group pop. Something about the way that bass drum works, the patience, and this pop sensibility, and then, of course, the experimental nature of the Velvet Underground. I heard all that stuff, certainly.
Yeah, like their first hit single, it wasn't an accident that they had the Be My Baby beat opening their first hit single.
Oh yeah. It's the Phil Spector boom, 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 shh, boom.
Exactly.
Boom. Yeah, totally. So they're taking turns making up these demos in their parents' house, and a lot of those recordings ended up being Psycho Candy. And so another important part of their sound was the use of a Chennai fuzz pedal. They bought it from their neighbors for a few bucks, and it's what it sounds like. It's a fuzz pedal that, they said used to be $20, and I looked at some on eBay and they're like $400 to $700 now.
They turned it on one time and they never turned it off again.
Yeah.
Exactly. They say they launched their career with a fuzz pedal in a Porta Studio.
Yeah, dude, there's some of these are like $2,500. I'm looking right now on Reverb. Jesus Christ.
There's a surprising number of bands that have a similar kind of story where they're like, one pedal did the whole job of making the sound of our band. It's not a bad strategy, young bands.
Yeah. Nowadays, I feel like you might even have to like make your own pedal or something like that. That
sure.
might be the other way. Yeah. But there's kits, yeah.
Right. It's like auto-tune, You can make a whole album with auto-tune, but everyone's doing that now. So anyway, they have some demos, and they meet a fellow Scot named Bobby Gillespie, and he's the founder of the band Primal Scream, which I'm sure we've all heard of. He ended up being their drummer for a while before the making of today's album. And he really liked their demos. And one thing that was funny about their demos they recorded is that the one that they gave him is that they recorded it on the back of a Syd Barrett tape. And so one side was their demos and the other side was still the Syd Barrett recording. And I think he thought that was really funny. And so he started going to bat for them. He was the only one that had their recordings. And so he introduced the band to a guy named Alan McGee, who founded a record label called Creation and also had a club in London. And then he booked their first gig. They'd never played a gig.
So wait. This is before the band Primal Scream, though, right? This guy eventually leaves and forms Primal Scream, or was Primal Scream already a thing?
I think it was happening around the same time. So I think they would go to shows, and they just met this guy because he would also go to shows.
This is like the very early days of that Scottish music scene, right?
Totally.
This is very first wave. Is that accurate?
100%. 100%.
Yeah, because I recall maybe about a year ago, we covered a sort of second wave Scottish band called Teenage Fan Club.
Totally.
And I feel like we were making some references to this stuff, but they would have been 5-ish years later or something like that.
Right. So it's funny because they get this gig and it's like months away. And so they don't have music. They don't have a set. And so the first thing they did is they got a camera and like started making advertising posters to show them as this like established rock band and just putting them all over the place, right? And so
I love that. Fake it till you make it, baby.
Yeah.
it's like pure hype.
And I read about that incident that none of the photos included both of the brothers in the same shot.
Right, because one of them had to take the picture.
Yeah, they were so introverted, they didn't want to ask any of their friends, so they took turns taking each other's picture in front of a fake stage.
It's hilarious.
That's pretty great, yeah. We never went to those lengths, Rob, but I feel like we'd spun some bullshit tales trying to get booked for the Chop back in the day.
Oh, yeah. Well, and our focus on photo shoots. I mean, we weren't a band for that long time, but we have several fairly professional photo shoots under our belt.
There we go.
So that says something.
Some of those are legendary, by the way.
Yeah, good stuff.
All right, so I've talked a lot, and I think now is a great time to take a little break and do a segment we call By the Numbers.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
Yeah, this is going to be great. Okay, so the first number is 2. 2 words, drunken violence.
Yeah.
Which are the most appropriate words to describe an early Jesus and Mary Chain live show.
Jeez.
At their very first gig, which I was just talking about a few minutes ago, the brothers got into a fist fight during sound check.
So they were playing in Glasgow then, yeah? It's just all drunken violence.
I think their first gig was in London.
You have more on what led to this fight? I mean, so far in the story, they seem like pretty subdued characters. Or are you saying they fought each other?
They fought each other.
Oh, I see. Got it. That makes sense.
They fought each other. Yeah. And that seemed to be a recurring theme throughout their history. So the theme of drunken violence continued to follow them around for the next number of years. How many, you ask? 14, which is the number of consecutive years Jim claims he was drunk on stage.
Jeez.
So at their first gig ever, the brothers got in a fist fight during sound check. At their second gig ever, Jim was pulled off stage mid-set and thrown down a flight of stairs by a bouncer and removed from the venue.
Wow. You got thrown off of the stage while you're performing by the... What do you have to do to make that happen? I've literally been in shows where the lead singer got naked and was spitting beer on the crowd, and it was just like, yeah, that's just part of the show. Yeah, there you go. What do you have to do to get thrown out?
It's punk, baby. What were you expecting, assholes?
Right, I've never even been like cut off at a bar. I mean, what would it take to get physically removed? All right, so the next number is 20, which is the average number of minutes their set lasted during their prime.
During their prime.
During their prime.
Oh, wow.
Maybe early prime.
Real crowd pleasers.
Yeah, in the book, the brothers talk about like having this kind of like animosity that they would stir up in the crowd. They would perform sometimes with their backs turned to the audience. They would look into the audience and just like try to egg people on into fighting them. They would say that half of their audience would think it was entertaining and funny, and the other half literally like wanted to fight them.
Wow. I did see the band Spiritualized one time, and the guy was turned with his back towards the crowd, and it did make me angry. So I sort of see it.
Yeah.
All right, the last number is 5. I don't know why I have 161 written. The last number is 5, which is the position it held on the UK charts in 1987. This album was also certified gold in the UK, and that's about as great as it got.
This was their best-selling record, then?
I believe so.
We say all mistakes with confidence on this show.
Okay, so just a couple more things to share about the making of this album. They just came off of a critically acclaimed album called Psycho Candy, which you talked about earlier. And the one thing that they knew they wanted to do is they wanted to make something completely different, almost the complete opposite, which I think is cool. It's like they could have done the same thing over and over and over and over again, but they made a conscious decision to be like, no, we want to do the complete opposite.
It's a cool urge. I'm not sure I agree that that's what happened. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think there was also a little bit of record company involvement in the creative decisions the second time around.
There was.
They were signed to what I think was a faux indie label that was a subsidiary of Warner Brothers. So they were signed to a major
Totally.
for all practical purposes. And they got away with delivering an incredibly anti-commercial debut album. But I think the label kept them on a much shorter leash for the second album.
Totally.
To the point of proposing really outrageous things like, hey guys, maybe you shouldn't self-produce this next one because you have no idea how to produce a record, and maybe we should connect you with some experienced producers this time.
They definitely had a lot of trouble finding a producer. They had producers in mind that they wanted to work with, a whole list of them, in fact, and they couldn't get anyone on board. One other thing I think is really funny is that they were talking about their influences leading up to the album and talked about how they would listen to a lot of Van Morrison, which you can really hear.
Well, he also is drunk on stage.
Right. Yeah, they had trouble finding a producer, and I ended up being really worried about Warner Brothers trying to intervene, as you alluded to, Brian. And so they kept going to these different sessions. They talk about going to a session with these like idiot producers and like couldn't really get it together. And they recorded something, and then at like midnight they had this like upright bass player come in and record some upright bass lines, and like they played it back, and they were just like laughing hysterically, like, this is so stupid, like, what are we doing here? And so they ended up working with a guy named Bill Price, who's like the first thing he said to them, he said, you're gonna walk away with your record, not mine. And I think that was something for them. It gave them enough confidence to finish the album. And so the album ended up being released through recording at 3 different venues, and which honestly, like recording at 3 different recording studios, you can't really tell. It sounds pretty even throughout.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
And so the album was released on August 31st, 1987, and that is all I have for the background. So now is a good time to get into the songs.
I just want to mention that you missed that Robert Christgau used the phrase erotic existential despair in his review.
Wow. There we go.
I enjoyed that bit of wordplay.
It's funny. I did read that, and I was just like, which one is weirder, throaty chugging or that? You know, it's kind of a coin flip.
It was also good, yeah.
All right, guys, let's get into the song. The first song that we're going to talk about today is
Song Heroes, but instead of peaking, let's just hang out for the entire duration.
You took my exact comment. I said heroes slowed down.
Yeah. With an extremely long outro. The do outro for 2 minutes on a 5.5 minute song seems a little fucking excessive to me, I gotta say.
This was a really weird choice to start the album with, because given some of their influences, this band secretly wanted to be pop stars. You can see that in their first album, Behind the Wall of Feedback. There was really a lot of traditional pop sensibility. And so for their second album, what do? They have this slow burn, 5-minute long meandering song as the opener. And it just seemed like it squandered momentum.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree. As a first-time listener, it's definitely one that you could just be like, okay, I'm done. That's what I thought when I first started the album. I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm going to try this another time. But I think it's almost like a useful tactic that if you get through it and get through the rest of the album, you kind of get a little bit of reward.
Yeah, it's like the Ween thing. We're actively trying to make you stop listening, but if you get through it, we'll give you some good stuff after the first song.
I don't think it's that bad.
No, it's not that. It's clearly nothing's that bad. Nothing's that bad.
Oh, no. I like the song. Yeah.
I like it just fine. I think it's pretty successful, but I also agree that it's an odd choice to kick things off, and that the do lyrics feel like a little bit of a lazy cop-out. I'm comparing them to them because I think they're actually pretty good at lyrics and pretty good at, like you said, Brian, the pop sensibility, a little bit more tightness. So it just feels like a weird opening track, but it's not that it's so different from everything else.
It might serve as a decent mission statement for this second phase of the band when you compare it to Psycho Candy, which was just drowned under feedback. And this is a song that, to my ears, has no wails of feedback in it that I could detect. Pretty clean playing. It's affected guitar, certainly, but a very clean sound, not a ton of layers to it. Almost like they were trying to make a point artistically that we can do a different thing than what the fans knew us for.
Yeah, this is my question, and maybe, Marty, you have more thoughts or intel, or anyone can jump in, but I'm trying to reckon these two things. On the one hand, they have a pop sensibility, and like Brian said, they kind of want to be pop stars. On the other hand, they're playing 20-minute sets, antagonizing the crowd, and doing all this anti-pop star stuff. Do you think in their mind they thought that that was the way they were going to go, and did they go on like that indefinitely? Antagonizing people?
No, they, in fact, right around the time of this album, sort of changed a lot of their approach. One of the things they did between the two albums was they fired Alan McGee as their manager, who I think had been, if not an instigator of a lot of the antics, a person who would always go to the press immediately and say, Jesus and Mary Chain cause riot, and make sure that it was in the headlines the next day.
I see.
And I think they saw this album as a little bit of them cleaning up their act in order to be musicians with an actual career and an actual future. And it was around this time that they started playing, if not hour and a half concerts, maybe 45 minutes or an hour, and actually playing the songs people expected and facing the audience and doing all those sorts of radical things that they wouldn't have done 2 years prior.
All the sellout things. Yeah.
Maybe the Alan McGee note that you just made, Brian, is the answer I was looking for, because he was kind of a mover and shaker. He's trying to get a scene together, and it might have just been of its time to try to get into the tabloid papers. That time probably lasted for about 10 years, but I feel like we've covered other UK bands that have tried antics like that. I know the Stone Roses had some incidents like that, kind of egged on by their manager. And wasn't Creation Records where Oasis originally signed, like in the early 90s too?
Yep.
Yeah.
And also, I think they ended up going back to Creation Records after Warner Brothers. I could be wrong, but I feel like they ended up going back there.
There must have just been this idea that any press was good press, because I feel like I've heard that story a few times around this time in the music industry.
Of course, you want to be like, hey, these guys are causing riots. It's going to get butts in seats, I think that's part of marketing when you don't have a budget.
Another possibility is these guys grew up in what was, by all accounts, a pretty isolated environment, being pretty introverted teenagers, spending more time with just their brother than with most people outside the house. And you can imagine when they go out into the world, they might stumble.
Sure.
At first with how they interact with other people, especially if you put a microphone in their hand and shine a spotlight on them. And so there's a view of this album which is some young musicians gradually, very slowly growing up. I say gradually because on the tour for this album, they did get arrested a couple of times for punching out fans.
Well, yeah, I do see this musically, certainly, as, like you said, a transition album, almost like the awkward teenage years of a band that is trying to go from unfocused, angry adolescence to like a little bit more of a mature sound. And it would make sense that that's not just evident in the songwriting, it's also evident in like how they approach being a band and how they approach being musicians. So that makes a lot of sense.
In their book, they make it seem like this album was a purposeful choice. And what they say is, why would we want to make just the same album again? They made it seem like they wanted to make something completely different than the one that they had just previously made.
Yeah, and that's fair. Again, I don't think they quite achieve that. But I see how it is a bit different, certainly.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the stories is that they went to visit their grandmother, and they happened to be like on TV. I think they were on Top of the Pops once, and then weren't allowed back on. And the grandma said out loud, "What are these two cunts doing on the telly?"
Yeah, it's old Scottish grandma. She's the one drinking and smoking, and grandpa's in the backyard, like doing chores and stuff.
All right, let's move it along here. The next song we're talking about is called "Deep One Perfect Morning."
And my thoughts are turning backwards, and I'm picking at the pieces of the world that keeps turning the screws into my mind.
Maybe I missed it, Marty, but do both of them sing, or does only one of them sing?
I think on the previous album, only one of them sings, and on this album is the first time that they both sing on the album.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so different singers on these first two tracks. The older brother William sang Darklands, and I'm pretty sure it's the little brother Jim on Deep One Perfect Morning.
So dude's got a pretty low voice. You're talking about the younger brother's the low-voiced guy, or they both have low voices? Because then I notice on this track, for instance, they do the octave vocal effect, where when he goes up a little in the melody from being pretty darn low, I would say lower than, for instance, I can sing, then they overdub a low octave over that higher melody. And it creates like a cool drone effect over the vocals.
Yeah, they do that a couple of times on different songs, and I think that is a very conscious and very, like this is a well thought out thing that somebody who has a little bit of experience knows to do that, to give you that weird ethereal sound that they get out of that.
It's a common trope, I think, for low-voiced male singers. I know the guy from The National does that a fair amount too, and it is a cool effect.
Yeah. I really love how, I know there's like drum machines. I love how there's like, in essence, no cymbals on the song. I think there might be like a very low electronic hi-hat, but then they just put in that tambourine that I'm pretty sure is actually being physically played, because it sounds like so radically different from the drum sound. It's just, I thought it was an interesting choice. It's very minimal, just it leads to a stark sound.
And this has like the lo-fi dark version of the Phil Spector beat that we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
This song also has a loud, quiet, loud dynamic, and it was released a month before the Pixies' first EP.
Before the Pixies invented changes in volume in songs. Yes.
Yeah.
Good for that.
Crazy. Yeah. It's revolutionary. By the way, we still get comments about that Pixies episode. They're not favorable comments.
I know. Pixies fans are insufferable. It's okay.
They really are. And I wasn't on that episode. The Pixies are fine, but get over yourself.
That's a great way to describe the Pixies. They're just fine.
Yeah.
The Pixies later covered a Jesus and Mary Chain song.
See, there we go.
Story checks out. I have to say, I listened to this a bunch, but it wasn't until maybe the last 48 hours that I really looked at the lyrics and tuned in on them, and they're better than I was expecting. I think there's some cool lyrics here.
Yeah, I'm sitting here warming to the coldness of the things that meet my eye is a pretty good opener.
Yeah. I think another example of like, he wrote a poem first and then was like, all right, let's put that to music, which is fine.
I got no problem with that.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also like the arrangement of this in the sense that it's a bit under 3 minutes. And after the kind of long, meandering intro track, especially with a slowed down song like this, there was a risk that they could just go on for too long, but they kept it tight. I think the pop sensibilities coming back into play here, where really compact, no fat on the bones of this song.
I would agree with that. And when I said that, I thought that some of the songs could have been longer. I was not thinking of this song. I was thinking much more of like I said, the hypnotic types of songs. Yeah.
And not the last song, which is 5 minutes and 30 seconds long. All right, let's move along to let me start this one. Honestly, like, I don't know that I get why this would have been the hit from the album.
Oh, I disagree. This is my favorite.
Really? Okay.
Well, first of all, it's the most up-tempo.
Yeah.
So I'll just admit that I prefer up-tempo music, or I'm in the mood for up-tempo music more often. But this is absolutely the one I would put on my mixtape. And I thought it showcased a little more of the dynamic range of the band. Maybe that's saying more about me and what I like, because I agree they're often going for this hypnotic, loopy drone vibe, trance vibe, right? But to me, this one kind of picked up and went somewhere.
But I feel like this one was very hypnotic in that they sort of kept that same vibe, but they just sort of like drove it home. They didn't switch it up the whole time. It's just kind of, right at you. My first initial note was low effort Ramones, which I mean, I think is probably pretty apt.
I wrote down Ramones. It's definitely the vocal intonation, something about it. It reminds me of the Ramones for sure.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and the simplicity of the chord structures and stuff like that, and honestly of the playing, because we haven't really talked too much about it, but none of the playing on here is really doing anything that a person with 6 months of experience on their instrument couldn't really do. Like, none of it's kind of blowing your mind in terms of like, oh my God, they're just really doing something that's so crazy. But they lean into the simplicity here, and they just like drive it at you. And by the end of it, I was definitely like, I agree, Rob. This is my favorite song.
When it first kicked in, my first thought was that it reminded me. I was thinking, "Out where the river broke, the beds are burning" song.
Oh, Midnight Oil.
Yeah, hell yeah, dude.
Yeah.
This is the song that got them on Top of the Pops, which was like their dream. They talk about how their dad, it was like his moment where he's like, I'm proud of my kids. And they said their dad would watch Top of the Pops over and over again in case they like were somehow on again and he didn't know about it.
Oh, wow.
But then he started asking them about like other bands. Be like, have you ever heard of the Talking Heads? And they were like, whatever. And then so they're saying that ended up being kind of getting into hip music just because he would watch Top of the Pops over and over again in case for some reason they were on. He didn't know about it.
Yeah. It's good dad. Good dad.
Nice. I also like the fact that this song sort of previewed the future for the band. They did change stylistically on each of their first several albums, and this sort of drum machine first sound with aggressive guitar was the direction they would go in for the album after this one. And so this, at least for them, was a sign of things to come.
Oh, nice.
Maybe because it was the one that gave them the big hit. Who knows?
It's the one that put money in their pocket.
Yeah, of course.
Well, you'd think they'd be like, oh, well, we just had a hit. We got to do the exact opposite now. I thought that's their whole vibe.
We got to find everyone who bought this and punch them in the face.
Yeah, it is kind of cool to think about, though, is if you were someone that bought Psycho Candy and you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to get. And then you buy this album and it's, again, Rob, you're right. It's not that different.
Sure.
It's not like buying like Nashville Skyline by Bob Dylan after like, the one he had before that.
No, I want to be clear, though. I want to be internally consistent. I think I certainly, and I think we all respect people who are trying to keep evolving.
Yeah.
That's an important component of artistry, and it's not everywhere. It's not as common as it should be.
Sure. Like a band that puts out like a metal album about a fast food restaurant, and then the next album they put out is a musical about Ghostbusters by Stay Puft by the Chop Band.
We enjoy variety.
Available now on bandcamp.com.
There we go.
Great plug. Okay, let's move it along. Let's go to the next song on our list, which is called Fall. Here's a little clip from Fall.
Yeah, so this had the most punk energy. It reminded me quite a bit of Pavement's song Unfair, which is off Crooked Rain. That was kind of running through my head, but I could also hear it leading more towards grunge, towards Nirvana. It wasn't my favorite tune, but I liked the energy they were inputting.
This is my favorite tune, for sure.
Oh, yeah? I couldn't take the singing on this one. I feel like his delivery sounds bored.
I thought it was a song that probably could have inspired everything that Nirvana ever put out. It is a Nirvana song, and it is like the Nirvana framework.
I buy it.
Yeah, I mean, my note is that like I can't exactly put my finger on who this influenced, but I know this influenced a ton of stuff. So it's probably just one of those like ubiquitous things. But again, it's not even in the construction of the song or even in the playing. It's me. It's just the vocal delivery. It just really did not work for me on this one.
Yeah, this one's my low point, not because it's terribly bad in an absolute sense, but because it doesn't fit stylistically with anything else on the album. I think this would have fit really well on Psycho Candy, their previous album, and it felt out of place on Darklands. But as you guys said, it did predict a lot of subsequent music by other bands.
Yeah. It's weird how you can just kind of like tell. You hear a song and it's like, oh yeah, like a bunch of people listen to that one. I can't even tell you who listened to it, but I know a bunch of people listened to that one, and it got in there somehow, to the zeitgeist.
The line that jumped out to me that I thought was really good was "I'm as dead as a Christmas tree." Well, that was a good line.
Yeah, I had that one highlighted.
It's one of like 9 lines in the whole song.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, they're not known for their internal. They don't change a lot.
Okay, let's get this moving and talk about the last song on our playlist, which is called About You. And here's a little clip from that song.
Can't see that you just beat out of time to refrain, and you and me. But when
Where's my fuzz guitar, man? Why'd you break the formula, guys?
Yeah, the pedal broke, Rob. The battery ran out from the pedal.
Right. They smashed it over some listener's head, and we're left only with the acoustic.
This is like the cool guy attempt at a love song. He's like, I don't want to be too vulnerable, so I'll just call it About You.
But, this is also one of those, like, even if you were just to hear this in isolation, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's an album ender. That's, like, the last song on an album, which there's 2 different kinds of album enders. There's, like, the long, say, like, Only in Dreams from the Weezer's Blue Album type of ending song, and then there's the short acoustic song, and this is... Yeah, the short acoustic song didn't really do it for me, but I do like that initial chord change they do, the A to the A7 chord change. I feel like that's a lot more flavor in the chords than I got on any other song on the album.
That's a good point. It was a little extra flavor. They stay pretty close to just major chords in other places. I listed it as we kind of obligatorily or have to list a low point on these focus lists. So for me, I listed this as the low point. But that said, it more or less fits, and particularly because of its sequence, like you said, Tom, coming last, I get it.
Yeah.
So I don't really hate it. It's fine. It's a little boring for me compared to some of the other tracks.
It's a little boring. Little Elliott Smith style vocal production, which it's all right.
It's interesting that they arguably did both of the 2 classic ways of ending an album, because they had this as the actual last track, the quiet acoustic song. The song before this, called On the Wall, is the other mode of sort of the longer slow burn song that could have been, in my opinion, an album closer and would have been a decent album closer. I think because they had done that and fitted in its place on the album, maybe they had nowhere to go but the slow acoustic one.
Yeah.
I think lyrically this works for me because this is about as happy as this album gets lyrically.
Which is frankly not all that happy, by the way. Yeah.
Right. And after, I won't say harrowing, that would overstate it, but a pretty depressing album, lyrically at least, this is almost like letting you down gently with a nice, gentle acoustic track, almost upbeat.
Yeah.
That's a good way to let you out of this miserable experience gently.
I agree with you on the lyrics being a lot more, I don't know, maybe even hopeful is the way that I would describe them. But I do have a nit to pick about the last line on the album, the last line on the album that they deliver. It doesn't make any sense because He's saying, like, there's something good about you. There's something good about you. And then he says there's something warm good about you. You've switched it up. It doesn't make any sense. It's a really clunky way to end the actual album. And I don't know. I feel like that, personally, I feel like the last line that you say on an album is kind of important, and you should make sure that that's good. And I don't know. It's almost like he just like misread the lyrics or something like that.
About you, I know there's something wrong. There's something wrong. There's something wrong. Good about you.
We didn't touch on the fact that there was a song on here called Happy When It Rains, and that immediately brought my mind to the 90s garbage hit,
I'm only happy when it rains.
which I never cared for, but now I like even less.
Yeah.
I saw an interview recently with the singer from Garbage who talked about the release of their first album and how nervous she was because she was afraid people would look at the track listing and say, you guys ripped off the Mary Chain,
There you go.
when Garbage was writing a totally different song.
Yeah. And she's also Scottish, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's a little suspect.
I had to make sure it wasn't the same song because originally I was like, oh, Jesus and Mary sung this song?
Yeah. All
Holy
right.
shit.
Jesus and Mary and their family band.
Okay, I think we have yapped enough about the Jesus and Mary chain, Darklands, and now for our final segment, our penultimate segment, I guess, which is to vote on whether this album belongs on the 1001 albums to hear before you die list. And I think we're going to keep with our tradition today and begin this with Brian. What do you think, Brian?
Okay, well, for an album to be on the list, I think it needs to be both important and good. And this is definitely important. This album was influential to so many bands and even so many musical movements that followed. This is also an important band. And honestly, they've got 2 albums on the list. And despite having made fun of this album a lot with my tweet length review, I think this is so much more listenable than Psycho Candy. You could put this album in front of somebody who doesn't listen to shoegaze, doesn't listen to noise rock, and they could find things to enjoy in it. Whereas with Psycho Candy, it's an honestly difficult listen. So I think important and to my ears good. It's a pleasant album, very melodic. I think it's an enjoyable listen. It's under 40 minutes long. So I vote for it being on the list.
You had us in the beginning there. I thought you were going to say it's got to be both important and good. And it was important, but not good. So.
Well, that's a perfect segue to Tom. What's your vote here?
Well, I feel like an album has to be both important and good. And this only got one of those criteria.
Oh,
No, I did not dislike this album, but I don't think I got to essential. I can get down with its influences, but I'll be frank, I don't know enough about where this type of music was at the time to say whether or not they were the trailblazers on it or whether or not there were other people also doing stuff like this. Because, I mean, I did hear stuff that was kind of like mid-career Cure in their sound, and so... You know, maybe just to be an asshole, I'm going to say no, because I think Rob's going to vote yes, and I just want to be that lone no vote on the record.
How dare you, Tom? You don't know. You're not the boss of me.
The classic Tom's spite vote.
Yes, there we go.
All right. All right, Rob. Go ahead, Rob.
Thanks, Marty. It honestly is a tough one for me because I did enjoy this week's round of listening, and I see the influence. But I also am not so sure. Essential is a really high bar. I think I'm going to match Tom's spite vote with more spite. And I'm going to come in with a squeaker yes. I do think it's good. I do think it was an enjoyable listen. I see the influences it had, and I would be inclined, having listened this week to both this and Psycho Candy, there are 2 albums on the list. I don't think they deserve 2, certainly. So I would be inclined, at least at this moment, to vote on this one over Psycho Candy. So for those reasons, I will give it a yes.
Awesome, Robbie. For me, I love the idea of just normal people that are just like average people that are like, hey, I like music and I want to be a musician and I'm going to go and do it, and then obsessing over it. and then doing it and then becoming successful. And I think for that reason, for me, I'm saying I want this to be on the list, and I'm voting yes. I just loved the story. If I didn't know the story, I probably would have been a definite no. But knowing the story and knowing how they put this together from nothing, I think inspired lots of other bands that I like to do the same thing. They're not raised with music. Their parents aren't necessarily like, hey, you should play an instrument. You just fall in love with music, and you're like, I want to make music, and then you make it happen with just a little help from your unemployed father. But
And also lots of government assistance coming to them too, because I'm sure they were on the dole as well.
right, sure. So yeah, for me, it's definitely yes. Sorry, Tom, your spite vote was nulled by our 3 yeses, and
No, that's exactly what I wanted. That's what I wanted to happen.
and congratulations, the Jesus and Mary chain, whose name apparently was just random. Apparently, there's a rumor they're looking around a room like there's Jesus chain or Jesus and Mary on a chain or something, but they say they just came up with it randomly.
It's a particularly bad name.
I've heard alcohol was involved.
I'm sure.
It sounds like the name that like a much more hardcore band would have.
It just feels clunky.
And we never talked about the album cover, which I don't know why I like it. It's something about it I like.
I also don't know why you would like this album cover, Marty.
That's fine.
But yeah, congratulations, the Jesus and Mary chain. You are on our list anyway.
I'm sure our listeners have lots of things to say about what we just said and want to cast their own vote. So I'm going to direct you over to Patreon, where there's a post right now. You can get in the comments. You can vote on this album. You can tell us all the places you were wrong, or you could submit your own mean tweet length review.
Yeah, and tell us all the places we can go fuck ourselves for not liking your favorite
And
band.
you can vote if I should ever be a host again. All right, so I think the last thing we're going to do, I think, Rob, you have some mail to read for us?
I do have some mail, but before we get into that, I just want to give a warm thank you to Brian for coming on the show and getting into it with us. Brian, thank you so much for coming, man.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Adding some much needed context to this band. As someone who is a fan of them, sometimes we feel like that is lacking since we often come in cold, so we definitely appreciate your thoughts and opinions.
Brian, you definitely came in well prepared and have done as good as anyone that we've had as repeat guests on our show. So great job.
Oh, thank you. I admit I had a 30-year head start because I've been listening to this album for a while.
And Brian, since you've been listening to the show, you have listened to the show, that maybe you had some complaints, sort of a live listener mailbag complaints, so you could deliver those complaints directly to our faces if you like. Now would be that opportunity.
Oh, yes. I happen to have brought a letter with me.
Oh, okay. Great.
A
I'm
missive.
excited.
Let's hear it.
Dear complainers, in 2024, I made a pilgrimage to Las Vegas to experience a live performance of one of the defining albums of the early 90s, U2's Achtung Baby. You know where this is going.
Oh, yes. Okay.
On the flight there, I listened to your review of the album. I was shocked when 4/5 of the cast voted against it. Most of the no voters blamed Achtung Baby for the band's subsequent forays into worse music. But if you're going to write off a record for being the mid-career reinvention that allows a band to record later disappointments, consider the parallels. Dark Side of the Moon gave Pink Floyd so much new commercial momentum that they got to keep going until they made the Division Bell. But you don't blame Dark Side for the Division Bell.
True.
OK Computer marked the end of Radiohead as a rock band and paved the way for Radiohead, the weird, artsy Pitchfork darlings. But you didn't vote against OK Computer.
Well, one of us did.
I did. Thank you.
And 1984 led directly to Van Hagar. But you didn't hold that against 1984. And you didn't vote against Purple Rain for being, oh, no, wait, you did vote against that one, I guess. Anyway, my point is, in the spirit of consistency, can we call the Achtung Baby episode non-canon and maybe put a star next to that album in the permanent record? Sincerely, Brian.
Brian, your premise here is that Achtung Baby is just like Dark Side of the Moon and OK Computer.
Well, it's a little better than both of those.
I do remember thinking we were quite harsh. I was the one yes vote, I believe, on that episode, Brian. And I also did the research for that, as I recall. It was a long time ago, so I don't remember all the details. But I remember that. And I did think it, First of all, I'm not surprised that Tom can't stand U2, but I thought the other guys on the call were a little overly harsh, even for themselves.
I love that album.
And yet, what do we say about Sacred Skulls, Rob? What do we say about them? Can they ever be edited?
Can't be changed.
Cannot be changed.
Can never be changed. Can never be edited.
Yeah.
Whatever we said, we have to live with
Yeah.
and take to our grave. But I'm just saying that I thought that was a little on the harsh side, that maybe we were judging the entire band's output based on, I don't know, the Edge's stupid nickname, something like that.
Knowing about U2 what I know now, I'm like, oh, I hate them. But if this was 91 or whenever that came out, yeah, I would have been a big supporter. I should have joined that one. But anyway, yeah, good job, Brian.
I think what Brian's kind of saying, though, is that I agree with, is that U2 kind of gets a lot of shit for being a band that only has, quote unquote, one sound. And yet this is a departure from that sound, and we're still giving them shit.
Yeah, I feel like they probably get a lot more criticism for themselves, more so than their music, which is a little bit unfair to the music. Because I think that it would be easy to say that they are insufferable people who have done some really good things. Like I said, Bono's an asshole, but I can't take away the fact that Bono has raised billions of dollars for charity all around the world. It's like super into it. But I would just hate to actually like hang out with him or anything.
Fair enough. Well, we appreciate that complaint letter in person, Brian. Love that.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening. Don't judge us too harshly as you go along. Okay, we got a couple more from fans who wrote into the inbox. And here's one. Pete from Long Beach writes, I first discovered your show when I was attempting to research the Pixies, and I stumbled on your episode about Surfer Rosa. I listened to about 10 minutes of that episode and hated every minute of it. I found another podcast that I liked much better and forgot about you guys. Anyway, fuck off. End of email. No. But since I have a lot of podcast listening time on my hands at work, and I love music, I somehow found my way back to your show, and I must be a glutton for punishment because I somehow convinced myself that I should start all the way back at episode 1 and listen to every damn episode you've ever done. I'm now up to episode 73, and in spite of the fact that you guys hate the Pixies and had never heard of Gang of Four and clearly don't understand the brilliance of Drive Like Jehu, I somehow keep coming back for more. You see this, audience? And I don't think this guy's heard yet, but we've mentioned Gang of Four many times since then about being a record that really grew on us, I believe.
Yeah, I actually love that record now. I think the record's fucking fantastic.
Sometimes a week is not enough. What does Adam say? We have a week to prepare and an hour to share, and sometimes the records just need a little more time. Anyway, he goes on to say, I do have one question about the premise of the show. Are you accepting the idea that there are actually 1001 albums that need to be heard before you die? Because that is a really big number. Like, when you vote down a record that doesn't belong on the list, is the implication that there is another record more worthy of taking its place? Or is the implication simply that 1001 is too damn high of a number? Great question.
We have the best listeners. That's a great question.
Early on, we talked about whether or not we should bring if you voted no, you should put this on instead album. That just turned into way too much work. And so we didn't do that.
Yeah. I feel like, I don't think we've ever addressed this question directly amongst ourselves. So I thought it was interesting for that reason. We can address it here live on the air. I am of the opinion personally that 1001 is probably too many. When we're talking about essential, truly essential for everyone who considers themselves a music fan, I think that is a hell of a lot. I think the list and the makeup of that list kind of proves my point. And so I am more than happy to pare it down to what I consider truly essential. Now, that said, there's also this other swath of records that you should be allowed to listen to and enjoy, some just for personal enjoyment, but I don't want to call them essential for every other artist. Sometimes you really love an artist. You want to obviously listen to their entire catalog. Like, I'm a huge David Bowie fan. I'm going to listen to all his records at some point, or Neil Young or somebody like that, but they don't all belong on this essential list. So that is my personal answer to the question.
I think a way to look at it is that you should listen to at least 1001 albums in your life. And I think you also should listen to shitty albums that are not essential. I really actually get a lot of enjoyment and instruction out of that about what I don't like in my music.
Okay, we have one more here. Matt from Portsmouth, UK writes, Hi guys, recently discovered your podcast, which I am enjoying. However, in the spirit of your podcast, I do have a complaint. I just listened to your specials podcast. You really need to have people from the UK on your show. You guys have no idea of British culture, which was deeply woven into the album. It went straight over your heads. You redeemed yourself a little on the Pogues episode, having someone from Ireland, albeit based in Australia, who could correct your Americanisms or explain what is actually happening. Anyway, keep up the podcast, but fact check your material and use people from the country the bands originate from. Gripe over.
And also, side note, is my math wrong that it would take us 19 years to do all 1001 albums?
I think it's more than that, buddy.
Marty just realized what he signed up for.
Yeah, your math is not wrong. Yeah.
Listen, we would love to have more people from more countries come on, and we have been actively trying to recruit those people. So feel free to send your audition tape over to 1001 album complaints at gmail.com. We love meeting complainers from lands and backgrounds other than our own who can be witty and eloquent and put down some decent audio. And so send them over and we can go from there, right? But of course, that's not always going to be possible. We're aware of that. And like all Americans, we don't care.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob. Great mail this week. And I think the last thing we have to do is turn things over to Tom, he's going to tickle the albinator and see what comes out.
All righty. Yeah. Thank you very much. I have the albinator here. It's been, drinking and screaming at random passersby as we were recording this episode. It's already gotten into 4 fights and lost all 4 of them. Let's see what it has to say about what we're going to listen to next week. So without any further ado, drum roll, please. We will be listening to... Ooh, nice little indie pop album. This is 1989 by Taylor Swift. An album that I'm sure went like 47 times platinum or something like that.
If I know our audience of middle-aged white dudes, I think they're very anticipating this one.
I was gonna say our guest next week will be a 9-year-old.
You're like, all of our fans are like, I don't even have to re-listen to this. It's just all so in there,
Yeah, it's the dark side of the 2010s.
Yeah.
I've been feeling we're gonna get is Adam gonna be on that one? I guess we'll find out, but I imagine he's gonna be really happy. He's gonna be happy.
He's gonna fangirl if he's on it. Yeah, we'll see.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Thanks to all our listeners, and special thanks to Brian for being here today. It was great meeting you, Brian, and hopefully we have you on again. And yeah, that's it for all of us at 1001 Album Complaints. I am Marty.
I am Rob.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Brian.
Boo.